Lovely Sunday morning, friends. How are you doing? Today, again, I'm headed towards my favorite coffee shop, and today I'm going to discuss with you why I did sell my GS finally after 1.5 years, and what were the bikes I were considering, and what did I choose finally. The idea of my video is not so that you will follow my opinion or follow my views, but the idea is that it will help you take an informed decision when you invest your hard earned money to buy some of these lovely machines. And we are lucky to have such a plethora of options in our times.
You know me, I won't be surprised if you leave out where it is.
Very good morning, friends. Lovely morning. As you can see, the Kolar Hills in the background, and I'm seated in my favorite place in Kolar, waiting for my morning cup of coffee. And as you know that I had posted a short, and it spoke about my selling my BMW G310 GS, which I had written for almost 1.5 years and ridden for about 25,000 kilometers. Let us talk about the bikes I had in consideration while I was going to select my next bike. The first one I had in mind was, of course, the Himalayan 452. In fact, in one of my vlogs, I had actually compared the Himalayan with my GS310, and you can have a detailed opinion that a review of the detailed opinion that I had about comparing these two bikes. But I'll tell you now why I did not choose the Himalayan. There are things I like, but today I'm not going to talk about the things I like about the Himalayan. Then it's going to be quite a long video. So the reason why I did not choose the Himalayan was, number one, was the way the weight of the bike is distributed. So as you know that my usage case will be almost 70% inside the city, 20% on the highway on breakfast rides like this, or maybe a short distances in and around Bangalore, and 10% will be off-road, because sometimes my friend compel me to get into tricky situations which I'm not very comfortable with, but I want my bike to have some kind of an off-road credential. So the reason I didn't choose Himalayan, as I said, was I don't feel very comfortable inside the city limits when you have to kind of go chug along behind slow moving traffic, take quick turns, etc. It's not a very comfortable bike. 196 kilos, but that's not important. It's about how that weight is managed with the bike. It feels a little top heavy. The side stand is too much sloping, and sometimes you find it, if you don't have exactly flat surface, you will find it very difficult to park the vehicle actually and take it off from the side stand. So these are cumbersome things that you will encounter on a day-to-day basis if you're riding primarily inside the city limits. So that's the reason I didn't choose the Himalayan. Otherwise, it's a very good machine. It's got a locomotive-like, tractor-like feel when you actually pull on the highway. Fantastic. Quite powerful, very unlike the earlier Royal Enfield 350s or the earlier Himalayan. So has got a decent top end, probably better than what I chose right now. But the reasons what I said is why I did not choose it. My next consideration was the KTM ADV 390, and that was the closest contender, I would say, to what I chose. The reason is that I had a look at the new color livery of the KTM ADV 390, and it was beautiful. And this was a white color of KTM that has recently been launched, and it kind of did away with some of the within inverted commas image that the KTMs have, and it looks beautiful. It looked beautiful actually, the edgy styling of the KTM, and of course it came with all the electronics that KTMs are famous for, which none of the bikes have in this category. Fantastic electronics, and of course the extreme nature of the KTM when you go above 6,000 RPM. But that's the reason why I did not choose it, because the KTMs come to life only above 6,000 RPM. It's fantastic on high revolutions and high RPMs, because that's when it comes to life. And if you're a person who is always looking for speed thrills on the highways, this is the bike for you. Look nowhere else. But in my case, 70% of my ride, as I said, is going to be within city limits. It's not a nice bike to live with, because you have to change gears too frequently, and the engine also doesn't sound good. It sounds a little rough, at lower RPMs. It sounds beautiful at higher RPMs, something like my GS also did. But of course, I'll come to the GS later on, why I finally sold it. So that's the reason I didn't go for the KTM. The third bike he had in consideration was, of course, it was not much of a consideration though, but some of my friends say that you go and have a look at it. So this was the Shotgun 650. I am not a fan of very heavy bikes, and I think I didn't even take a test ride of the bike. I just sat on the bike, moved it from left to right, and I was not comfortable with it. 240 kilos of weight chugging along in city traffic on a day-to-day basis, behind slow-moving buses, cars. It's not a nice feeling. So it was out of my contention. The fourth bike I actually looked at was the new third generation Duke, because some of my friends suggested. Fantastic bike. I think it has got more tractability than the earlier generation KTM engine. But somehow, two things I didn't like about the bike. One was the looks. I don't know, extended fins, etc. In fact, I like the earlier generation Duke more, but that's a personal choice. I didn't look like the plasticky extended fins, etc. It doesn't appeal to me aesthetically. The second thing is that I don't like the riding position of the Duke. I know it has got a decent ground clearance. It has got a nice suspension travel. You can do some amount of off-road with the new Duke 390, and the engine is fantastic. 47 bhp of power. I mean, that is a power you get kind of in some of the 7 lakh to 8 lakh category bikes. Beautiful machine, but that sitting position, that committed riding style, rear set foot pegs, it's not made for me for a ride on a day-to-day basis. Maybe for someone much younger than me it would make sense, but not for me. So these were the 4 bikes I was considering, and why I did not choose. So that was my rationale. Now let me tell you why I did sell my GS finally. Well, couple of reasons. First thing is, I had done almost 25,000 kilometers and retained my GS for 1.5 years. I had used it extensively within the city limits, office commute, in chock-a-block traffic. I had used it on the highways. I have done 700 kilometers in a day on my GS without any fatigue. Lovely machine in terms of riding comfort. And I have done some off-road. Some of them are quite extreme actually, in Ketanhalli Falls, etc. And I could keep up with the Himalayan 4-valve double one and other bikes of the scrambler category. But let me tell you, I sold it for 2 reasons. The number one reason is I got bored of it. And you will get bored of any bike after a certain amount of time. It doesn't matter whether you ride a 150cc, 350cc, a 500cc or a 600cc, unless you are in the 1000cc category. So that's one of the reasons, but I didn't want to upgrade on the cc. That was not the reason why I changed from the GS. I got bored because I knew the machine so well after riding for so long. I knew what are its limitations. I knew what are its advantages and strengths. I was looking for different kind of strengths, understanding the strengths that this bike had. And it's supremely comfortable, and that's the biggest USP of this bike. If you're going to use it on a regular basis like I did, it's one of the best bikes, and this is one of the longest I've retained any motorcycle in my life, let me tell you. Why I kind of disposed it, the second reason is, of course, very important, and it's about the engine sound. I think a lot of people on YouTube will tell you about it. I did not like the engine sounded, and of course I know that this engine is almost 5-year-old, and BMW has not done much in upgrading this machine in the 5 years. I mean, upgrading the engine in the last 5 years. What they have done is change with the colors a little bit here and there, and they are in the BS6 model. They have done something about vibrations, etc. But essentially the character of the engine has not changed. When you start, it still feels like you are actually shaking a jar full of glasses, broken glasses, something like that, which is a sound I don't like, because you will understand what I speak when you ride the bike I chose and this bike side by side, back to back. And I did that during my reviews. And the first thing is that happens to you is love at first sound, So with the bike I chose, and I'll come to it, which is the bike I chose. I think you would have guessed it by now. And it doesn't sound good to me. And of course, it does sound good above 4,000 RPM. Between 4 and 6,000 RPM is the sweet spot of this bike. And it sounds beautiful. There is a gentle purr from the engine. You are doing about 100 kmph, but that's the sweet spot of this bike. It can do up to 120 kmph, not much of stress. But beyond that, it's extremely gruff, But of course, I rarely do speeds more than 120 kmph in the kind of city that I live in or the kind of places that I travel to. So that was not my requirement that I should be doing, breaking the sound barrier or something like that. So one was the sound, the other was me getting bored with it after a certain amount of time, and the third was, of course, as I said, the nature of the engine. Somehow I felt that the engine lacked some kind of a character. For example, the Royal Enfields, they have some kind of a character. You can make it out. People love Royal Enfields because the unique characteristic sound, the unique characteristic vibration that they emanate. There was nothing like that from the GS. There were vibrations, not much, but the engine did not have a particular character of its own. I hope in the future generations they change it. So those were the reasons why I actually changed from my GS and chose the bike I did. Now I'll talk about which is the bike I chose. Well, you'd have guessed by now, I have chosen the Triumph Scrambler 400X. And the reason I have chosen the Triumph Scrambler 400X is not some of the reasons people will tell you about over the BMW G310 GS, why I sold it and bought this one. People will tell you that that is expensive to maintain, BMW service is expensive, etc., etc. Spares are expensive, but that was not my consideration. BMW has a great brand image. I wanted to live with the BMW. Yes, it feels good to ride a BMW. Even Triumph is not a, small or puny brand. It feels nice to be a Triumph owner. At least at this price point. Earlier nobody would have imagined, spending below 10 lakh and owning a Triumph. So that's the kind of privilege you get with the Scrambler and the Street 400. But I chose this bike primarily because of the way it looks. It has that classic Scrambler kind of look, and I think it will suit people of my age category, those classic retro kind of looks. At the same time, it has got decent off-road capability. In fact, you have seen some of the vloggers, they have traveled to places like Sandakphu, etc., which are extreme conditions. Even with 150 mm of suspension travel at front and back, and with that the kind of ground clearance it has managed to do those extreme terrains. So not a problem. It is a very tractable engine. It is the most tractable 400cc bike in the market today, let me tell you, and I'm 100% convinced about it, whatever you say. So it pulls from 2000 RPM all the way to 5000, 6000, 7000 RPM easily on any gear. Even you can do it at 6th gear. You can't imagine this on the Himalayan, on the GS or on the ADV 390. So the tractability is phenomenal. If you're primarily going to use this bike within city limits, there's nothing even close to it at this point of time. Build quality, premium fit and finish, looks the part. Even if you take more expensive bikes into consideration, put them side by side, people will say this is the more expensive bike. That is the kind of build quality Triumph has managed to offer at this price point. Phenomenal. These are some of the points, apart from the fact that it has got fantastic acceleration. Till 6000 RPM, no questions asked, it will outdo many of the otherwise popular fast bikes, phenomenal. So you're not at a dearth of power at any rev band, within the city limits or even in the outskirts actually. Of course, I have not done high speed runs or top speed runs. I'm not interested in doing that also. But I think it will kind of ticks most of the boxes that I was looking at, and that's the reason I've chosen the Triumph Scrambler 400X. More ride reviews are going to come. I'm going to talk about my day-to-day experience, riding off the road, riding on the road, riding inside the city, riding in traffic, riding in on the open highway. I'm going to talk about everything in detail. Now I have the bike for myself, so wait for those reviews, and I'll be happy to share with you and show some love if you love them, and do subscribe to my channel if you love to hear about the bikes I ride and why I ride them and the places I go and why I go to these places.